Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you guys are new. Today's makeup look is going to be on my beautiful model Jade. We actually used to work with each other at Ulta, so it was really cool just getting to catch up and chat with her. I like to start every makeup application with the skin prep first. I believe that doing skin prep first just fully provides that extra time you need to have all the products absorb before you put makeup on top. I'm first starting off with the Charlotte Tilbury Glow Toner. This provides a lot of hydration because it's made with niacinamide. It also does provide a slight glow to the skin as well, and I find it really useful to remove excess oils or any residue that may be still sitting on the skin. Once the toner is applied all over the skin, I'm going in with a moisturizer. This is the BELIF Aqua Bomb. I chose this because it not only is a moisturizer, but it also acts as a primer as well. It leaves behind more of a tacky residue. Not as tacky as the Milk Hydro Grip primer, but it does provide some sort of a tack, so you can put products over top of it. I chose this moisturizer for her because she's a little bit more on the dry side. She doesn't have any physical dry patches, but I could tell that she doesn't have any excess oils necessarily sitting on her skin. So I went ahead and just prepped her for normal to dry skin. Because of the gel formula, it is super lightweight, but it also still provides that intense hydration that you really need. Now I'm moving on to the actual makeup because I need to let the skincare sink in a little bit. I'm going in with the Benefit Brow POWMADE. It's in the shade 4.5. It's a little bit of a neutral to warm brown color, I want to say. Pretty similar to the Anastasia Dip Brow Pomade. I'm taking an angled brow brush, and as you can see me doing, I'm starting with the front of the brow, and I like to follow the path of the way that the hairs grow naturally. In the front of the brow, they always grow upwards, so I'm using my brush and spiking them up. Then as I'm going toward the tail of the brow, I'm pushing my brush so it goes a little bit more flat, so it goes along with the hair and the way that it grows in the tail. Whenever you are working with brow gels or pomades, just know that they can get very dark and very heavy really quickly. So you always want to make sure to have a pretty light hand to start off with, and then you can always add a little bit more. Just make sure, however, to stay away from any darkness toward the front. Otherwise, it creates more of that Sharpie, boxy looking brow, and I personally don't think that's very cute. As you can tell here, I'm mostly just defining the shape and the edges of the brow a little bit more. I'm doing more of that defined, structured kind of brow. If you want to do a brow that's a little bit more fluffy, you can choose a brow powder instead of a pomade. A lot of the times people are pretty particular about how they like their brows though, so before you choose which medium you're going to go with, make sure you ask your clients if they like a more defined and structured brow or if they want it to look a little bit more natural or feathery, and that way you can choose which method you should go for. I personally like to go in with eyes next. In case I have any fallout, it's a lot easier to clean up fallout from a person's face that does not already have foundation and concealer on it. I'm taking the Beauty Bay Eye Base in the shade 4, and this is pretty much just going to act as kind of a cream concealer sort of base. I love using bases like this though that have a little bit of a tint to it, because it cancels out any discoloration on the lids, and it ultimately makes colors just pop a little bit more since you have that even color base. I'm applying this using a flat concealer brush. This is because I like using the tinted base to carve up underneath the brows and give them a little bit more structure underneath. This is a good trick, especially when people have brow hairs that they haven't plucked beforehand. This is a way that you can conceal those stray hairs and make it just look a little bit more clean. Once I've carved up underneath the brow, I go ahead and put the base all over the lid, just tapping as need be, trying to get as much of the lid covered as I possibly can. I do think these work very similarly to the P. Louise bases, which I actually do like a little bit more just because of the fact they were a little bit more pigmented than this one. Both of the bases, you are supposed to use them wet. You can technically set them down with powder, which I would suggest for people who have more oily eyelids. Alternatively, you can also use something like a matte base such as the MAC Paint Pots. Those also work really well for people who have oily eyelids. Since she didn't have that problem, I went ahead and just used them as they're intended to be. So since I'm using these shadows directly over top of a wet base, I like to go in with a completely clean eyeshadow brush that's a little bit more fluffy, just sweeping over the whole entire lid to remove all the excess creases and any of the excess product as well. This will make sure that no shadows will stick to any globs that may be left over. Next, I'm going in with the Patrick Ta Major Dimension eyeshadow palette. This is by far one of my favorite eyeshadow palettes. I feel like the colors are so blendable. There's very minimal fallout, and they're very forgiving in general, especially for beginner makeup artists. I do realize that this is a little bit pricier of an option, so beginners may not find this super budget friendly, but in general, I think it's very adaptable for all skill levels. Now, I'm first going in with a transition color. I think I'm going to be taking, let's see, I'm reading off the back of the palette because that's the only time there's names on here. I think the color is Absolutely. It's like a mid-tone tan shade. The whole entire palette is more warm tone, so they are going to shift a little bit more so that way. I'm taking that in combination with the shade Mother. That is a little bit more of a reddy brown kind of color, a little bit more on the burgundy kind of side. And I'm just mixing the two of those together, using that transition color every once in a while to blend out the edges. I'm just going to be going back and forth with that for a little bit. As you can see, I'm using a little bit more of a tapered kind of brush. This is usually the style that I like when I'm going in with more delicate crease work. I like it because it makes sure that the color is concentrated where I need it and doesn't get too messy, but it also allows me to pack on enough pigment as well. Lastly, I'm going in with the shade Scandal. This is the deepest, darkest of browns. It still has a little bit of warmth to it, so it's going to go along with the rest of the shadows. I just like to take it on a very, very tapered brush just so I can concentrate it in the area that I want it to. I'm keeping it pretty low on the lash line. I don't want to blend it up too high. The higher you blend it, the more smoky it's going to look. Overall, I think that I'm really happy with the way that I placed this, just a little bit in the crease, but not too high. Then I'm taking that same tapered brush that I had before with the other two colors, and I'm just smoking it out a little bit. Next, I'm going in with a loose pigment on the lid. I love loose pigments because they give such an effortless shine. However, they are not to be mistaken with chunky glitters. The pigment is really finely milled, so you get that really nice shine to it and really nice pigmentation while not being super chunky. I'm using the loose pigment by MAC called Tan. I would describe tan as a rose gold kind of color. It's not really champagne, it's more of a rosy tone. It looks stunning on people of medium to deeper skin tones, as you can tell. I love pairing it with these warmer tone eyeshadows, especially with the Patrick Ta palette. I like using flat packing brushes to apply these. It just packs a little bit more of a punch, make sure to lay on the pigment. And for those of you wondering, I don't use a glitter glue for these. I find that the eyeshadow bases, since they are a little bit tacky themselves, they tend to hold on to loose pigments really, really well by themselves. So yeah, I don't use any sort of glue or anything. I just press the pigment on top like an eyeshadow. Here you see me just working up into the crease a little bit with the pigment and turning it into a softer cut crease. Then next I'm going on to eyeliner. I'm going on to one of my absolute favorite gel liners that I've ever found, the INGLOT AMC gel liner in the shade 77. Super black eyeliner. Honestly, I've never found anything that works as well as this eyeliner does. I personally like working with gels just because it's not only makeup artist friendly since you can scoop it out and depot it and it's 100% hygienic, but I also like the fact that they're just a little bit more easy to apply rather than liquids. Sometimes liquids can be a little bit less forgiving since they dry instantly, whereas gels, you can kind of manipulate them, smudge them out if you want to, and just kind of work with them a little bit more effortlessly than any liquids or pencils. I know some people in the past have mentioned that they tend to transfer up onto people's eyelids, but if you have your clients keep their eyes closed for a little bit after you apply it, it'll let the eyeliner set in place and become waterproof, and it shouldn't transfer at all. I love applying these gel liners with the EYESHADOW Beauty angled liner brushes off of Amazon. I can link all the tools that I use below just to let you guys know, but those are my ultimate favorite liner brushes. I get that question a lot, so I figured I might as well tell you guys what my favorites are. I am planning on doing a wing on her. I just wanted to make sure to draw my line straight across first, get the thickness right before I decide to do the wing. Also, a little trick that I've learned along the way of me being a makeup artist is that I usually use my thumb, pull up on the lid a little bit, and that creates more access to the lash line. Sometimes it's really hard to get right near the lashes without tight lining, so I like to use my thumb and press up a little bit. Now onto the wing. You see me instructing the client to open her eyes completely, look straight ahead, and then I'm drawing out where I want the wing to actually sit. This will help you with your placement. There's a lot of times as a beginner makeup artist where I place my wing too high, too low, not far out enough, and it was only because I tried to draw the wing in when their eyes were closed all the way. People's eyes take on a completely different shape when they're closed as opposed to when they're open, so that's why I usually draw on the wing line when their eyes are open completely. So I usually go ahead and draw in the bottom of the wing, if that makes sense, like the bottom of the triangle, and then I'm using the tip of the eyeliner brush to connect the very tip of the wing all the way to the middle part of where the liner is, and then I'm just using the liner to fill in the gap. For the lashes, I'm going in with the L'Oreal Lash Paradise Waterproof Mascara on a disposable applicator. I usually gravitate toward drugstore mascaras since I go through them so often. Because of hygiene reasons, you can't use the actual applicator that comes with the mascara, so it doesn't really make sense to me why I would continue to buy a high-end mascara. And a lot of the times, I'm just sticking on false lashes anyways, so it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But anyways, usually I just have the people close their eyes all the way, and I'll stick my thumb up on the eyelid. As you can tell, any excess mascara that I accidentally miss on the lashes will get on my thumb instead of getting on the person's eyelid, so it's almost like a mascara guard. I forgot to mention that before I even went in with mascara, I measured her false lashes that I'm going to put on her, cut them to the length they need to be, and then I applied my Kiss lash glue, and they're actually currently drying while I'm putting on the mascara. You never want to sit around and just be waving the lashes and not doing anything. That wastes a ton of time, and that is one of the ways that artists waste time that I've seen. I give the lashes about 60 seconds to get tacky, so then after they're dry, I go ahead and have my clients just look down all the way. If you have them close their eyes, that tends to stick to the bottom lashes sometimes. I've had really bad experiences in the past with gluing my clients' eyelids shut, so please do not repeat the same thing as I do. Keep in mind though, if they don't close their eyes all the way, their eyes can get a little bit more sensitive, so you really have to make sure that you're taking precaution. I use the Tarte Lash Applicator to apply them. I'm just sticking them in the middle first, and then I'm adhering them to the outside and the inside. Usually I will ask at that point in time if a client feels like they're uncomfortable in any way, if they're poking them in any way, and if they don't feel like they're poking them, then they will get used to them in about 5 minutes. After both of them are on, I usually use my fingers and push them up a little bit. A lot of the times this can make it feel a little bit more comfortable on the clients. Just takes a little bit to get used to. It's kind of a funky feeling if you've never had them on before or don't wear them that often. Next, I'm going back in with the eyeliner and just going right over the lash band to hide it a little bit more. Again, it's just the really fine details like this that some artists just don't take into account. So it's really important to pay attention to detail and make sure that your lines are really clean and as precise as you possibly can get it. This is just my personal opinion, but when you pay attention to details like this is usually what separates out an okay artist to a really great artist. It also makes for a cleaner makeup application. Next, I'm going in with the NARS Natural Radiant Longwear Foundation. I'm taking a combination of the shades TAHOE and MARQUISES. MARQUISES is a little bit too orange toned. You could definitely tone it down with a blue foundation mixer using color theory, but instead I went in with the shade TAHOE, which is a little bit more yellow toned, and overall I felt like it was a perfect match. I mean, you can see the way that it nearly blends into the client's skin. It looks absolutely amazing. The NARS Natural Radiant Foundation is a full coverage foundation with more of a satin finish. It gives a really nice glow to the skin without being too dewy. I tend to use all silicone based foundations just because they are a lot more lightweight on the skin. They fill in fine lines and wrinkles a little bit more, and they're overall just a really nice texture for foundations. I go in with the same concealer brush that I use to carve out the eyebrows and also apply the eyeshadow primer. I use it to draw on tiny little strokes onto the face so I can concentrate the coverage in certain areas. Then I'll go in with a disposable sponge. This sponge is from CVS. It's part of the One and Other brand. It's just their house brand that they carry. It is infused with hyaluronic acid, which means that it is a lot softer than normal disposable wedge sponges. It's firm enough that it doesn't fall apart on you and isn't super flimsy, but it also isn't super hard to the fact that you feel like you're just pounding on your client's face with a brick. I've always kind of been a control freak whenever I do makeup, which is why I choose not to do airbrush makeup. I feel like I just can't control it as well and control where the product's going. I like to be as precise as possible, and that's why I choose to use a concealer brush in combination with the sponge so I can make sure that everything is going where I want it to go. The sponge is also dampened, by the way. I carry a spray bottle full of water with me. I know I always get asked sometimes if the sponge is wet or dry, and I definitely dampen it every single time. Since our skin does have natural fluids that come out of it, I feel like it just helps sink in everything a little bit more. I'm taking my time and going around certain areas. Again, this helps with a more precise application. It does take a little bit longer than just using a fluffier foundation brush or even a denser one, but at the same time though, you can also kind of control the coverage a little bit more so it doesn't get super cakey really quickly. While you're watching me apply the rest of the foundation on her face, I wanted to point out really quickly, everybody needs to have realistic expectations of what the foundation and makeup in general is going to look like on your face. Whether you're a makeup artist and you're comparing your work to other people, which you shouldn't be technically, but I know all of us do have that inclination, or if you're a client that is potentially going to get makeup done by an artist, please keep in mind that the way that your skin looks originally without any makeup and how you take care of your skin is ultimately going to decide how the makeup actually is going to turn out. The more texture that you have on your skin, the worse that makeup is naturally going to look. Makeup can only hide discoloration. It's not going to hide texture. In fact, sometimes it may make it more prominent because it is another layer of something that you're putting on your face. Something that is not skin, it is another product. So automatically is going to look a little bit heavier the more texture that you have. This client had amazing skin to begin with, so that's why it looks like everything is just melting and sinking into the skin, because she does a good job at taking care of it herself. That's why I tell people that it is 50% the client's responsibility to take care of their skin, to create a solid canvas for your makeup artist to work with, and then your makeup artist will go the other 50%. But you do need to take care of your skin and prep it as good as you possibly can. Please do not expect us to reverse 20 years of you not taking care of your skin. We are makeup artists, not plastic surgeons. Okay, sorry about my little rant there, but we are going on to concealer next. I'm using the Too Faced Multi-Use Concealer. I'm combining the shades Light Beige and Sand. I just wiped off that concealer brush a little bit so it clears the foundation out, and then I'm using it to go down the center of the face. I went a little bit on the center of the forehead, right down the bridge of the nose, on the sides of the nose where we tend to get redness sometimes, on the upper lip, and then also on the chin as well. This just gets rid of any discoloration or maybe any redness that appears in those areas, and it provides a little bit more coverage as well. I'm also taking that sponge, same sponge as I used before, and making sure that everything is tapped in really nicely and it blends in with the foundation. When you're picking out concealer shades, I don't feel like there's a right way or a wrong way to do it, but I do feel like sometimes people do go a little bit light with the concealers, especially if you are working with people of deeper complexions. It can tend to turn a little bit ashy, and it may also not cover as much either. So that's why I usually go with a concealer shade that's maybe 1 or 2 shades lighter than their actual complexion. This way I can get the amount of coverage that I want to while still being able to brighten and highlight the face. As far as the actual technique that I did to go up underneath the eye, everybody does this differently. Keep in mind, makeup artistry is not a one-size-fits-all. Please do what works best for you. I usually go in an upside-down triangle underneath the eye. I go more in a traditional sense. I just feel like this gives the most brightening and highlighted under eye effect, and it just makes it look really smooth. Makes it blend in with the foundation a little bit more too. I usually have my clients look up directly, and be careful underneath the eyes as you're doing this. Give your client enough time to blink. If their eyes are watering, make sure that you give them enough time to kind of settle down. When you're an artist first beginning, you do have to learn what pressure to exert on your clients. Since you cannot feel it yourself, you have to make sure you're using a light enough pressure, and do not use the same pressure as you use on yourself. It's not going to work. It'll be very uncomfortable for your clients. So learning your pressure is another skill that an artist has to acquire. As you can see, the concealer just blended in super seamlessly with me doing that upside down triangle technique, and also brightened up the center of her face simultaneously. Next, I'm going in and setting the under eyes with powder before they start creasing on me. I'm going in with the Huda Beauty Loose Easy Bake Powder, and this is in the shade Blondie. It's a perfect shade for her complexion. I'm taking that same sponge and I'm going right in, dipping in with the powder and applying it underneath her eyes. As you can see me doing before I even went in with the powder, I'm going ahead and using my ring finger to tap out any excess product that settled in any lines underneath the eyes. If you skip this step, all you're doing is setting the concealer into the crease, and in turn making it seem a lot more prominent and also a lot more dry underneath the eyes. By tapping this out ahead of time, it just makes a more seamless looking appearance. The next thing I'm doing is setting powder right down the center of the face. I do this as a general step, especially if somebody says that they have more combination skin. I will add a lot more powder if somebody does have a more oily T-zone, and I might use a more mattifying primer if that's the case as well. But this client did say she had normal skin. I asked beforehand just to make sure that it lasted on her as long as possible. I especially want to set around the areas that it can possibly sweat off or also come off throughout the day, such as around the forehead line, tip of the nose, and also on the chin as well. Next, I'm going in with a cream bronzer. I'm going in with the Chanel Les Beiges cream bronzer in the darker shade. I believe they only have 2 shades, the original one and the darker one. I went in with a larger, dense foundation brush, and I think I should have gone in with a little bit of a smaller one. I didn't hate the way this looked, but I just have changed up the technique since then. I think I filmed this video in like March or April or something. It's been a really freaking long time since I filmed this video. As you can see me doing, I'm taking that flat foundation brush and going in upwards motion foundations on her cheekbones. This is just going to help lift up the face as opposed to drag it down. I feel like a lot of artists tend to just go along that like fish face line, if you know what I mean, and tend to drag down, but realistically we should be blending up instead of down. Then I'm going also around the perimeters of her hairline as well. This bronzer is more of a bronzer slash contour in my opinion, so I like to apply it where I normally apply bronzer too. With bronzer, you're trying to bring back that third dimension inside of somebody's face since you took it all away whenever you put foundation and concealer on. I'm also going in with that flat foundation brush and contouring out the sides of the nose. I'm taking it from where the eyebrow stops and then going right down the sides of it. Also going on the tip of the nose as well, just to connect everything through. Next, I'm taking the Huda Beauty loose powder again in the shade Blondie, and I'm using that damp sponge to carve out up underneath the contour. This is going to create a sharper line and a more defined look. I overall want to make sure, especially with deeper skin, that the contours really stand out to create that dimension to the face. The deeper the person's skin, the harder it is to create this. Then I'm just letting the powder sit on for as long as it takes me to do the rest of the powder products, and then I'll dust it away. I don't like to let it sit for too long. Next, I'm going in with the powder bronzer. I'm going in with the Huda Beauty Glowish bronzer in the shade Tan Deep. I'm applying this with a fluffy angled powder brush. This one's from IT Cosmetics. I think it's part of the Live Beautifully Fully collection. As you can see, this powder is just deepening up where the contour is to define it a little bit more, and I'm basically just going over the places that the contour was to begin with. I have had the Huda Beauty Glowish bronzers in my kit for such a long time. They're really fantastic bronzers. They have a little subtle glow to them, so they aren't a flat matte bronzer, which I really like. They also are almost impossible to go heavy-handed with, so I do highly recommend them for beginner makeup artists. Of course, they are in that higher price tag, but I do highly recommend them. And then once I'm done applying the powder bronzer, I'm going to go ahead and use a clean brush and dust away the excess powder that was sitting underneath the contour. Next, I'm going in with the NARS Rising Star Cheek Palette in the shade Premier. It's a deep burgundy color within that palette, and I'm so freaking sad that this is not a permanent collection. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm trying to find a dupe for this shade, so if anybody has like a really deep burgundy colored blush that has a little bit of luminosity to it that they really like the formulation of, please drop it down below. I'm not a person that normally goes heavy-handed with blushes, but if somebody really wants a good blush, then I'll go ahead and put a liquid down first and then do the powder over top just to make sure it stays on a little bit longer and a little bit more vibrant. Next, I'm going in with the best highlighting palette. It's the DIOR Backstage highlighting palette, and I'm going in with that combination of the champagne shade and the bronze shade inside of the palette. The brush I'm using is a small tapered highlighter brush. It's actually a dupe for one of the Anastasia brushes, but I just got it off of Amazon. I'm putting it on the cheekbones, on the temples, and right down the center of the face as well. Next, I'm going back in with the Patrick Top Major Dimension eyeshadow palette. I like to mimic whatever colors are on top of the lid on the bottom, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I like to start out with the darker color first, and then using a smaller tapered brush to smoke out the lash line with the lighter colors. Again, make sure you're very cognizant about putting too much pressure underneath the eyes, letting your clients blink, and also just making sure to not go too heavy-handed so your client's eyes don't water. Also, I'm not sure where this footage went, but somehow I lost the footage of me applying the lower lash line mascara. And besides that, now I'm going on to the lips. I'm taking the ESUM double-ended lip liner in the shade Nude. This one has a really chocolate dark brown kind of color to it, and then also a lighter tan color. I almost needed a shade right in the middle of these two because I kept going back and forth between the lighter and the darker one to make sure to get the right color for her lips. Here you see me flipping around the pencil because I realized that the tan shade that was the lighter one did not really go dark enough, so I flipped around to the other one and I'm overlapping a little bit. Originally my intention was to do an ombre style lip, but I ended up realizing that I wanted to use another lip gloss and it filled in the lips completely, so I was just like, oh well, I'll just do this. So I spent such a long time like trying to fade in the lip liner and get it perfect for an ombre, and then ended up just covering up with lip gloss, but you know what, it's all okay. The lip gloss that I ended up using was the NYX Butter Gloss in the shade Toffee. It's a deep brown, almost like a very, very deep mauve. I'm very terrible at describing colors, so I'm so sorry. I think it complemented this look really freaking well, so I'm glad I went with that overall. Then lastly, I'm just setting everything with the MILANI Make It Last setting spray, and that is about it. I hope you guys really enjoyed the tutorial. Let me know if you want to see any more tutorials. I do have a whole entire tutorials playlist on my YouTube channel, so go ahead and check that out if you guys want more. Don't forget to subscribe and also like the video for me, and I will talk to you guys in my next video. Alright, bye!